Okay, first phase of the assignment. This is the massing. As I explained before, I ultimately want to have 3 massing versions of the building. So these are the 3 massing options I'm going to use, but what I'm going to show you is going to be just the analysis of this first one. So I will open that up. So I start with a file that shows me just the mass, and I'm quickly going to go into the Massing and Site tab, In Place Mass, and I'm going to add some context, some neighboring buildings that will give me some shadow. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool and just somewhat quickly create some random sort of neighboring buildings. These are all going to be one mass, but I'm not going to do any analysis on them, so that's fine. And I'll just click on the rectangle, click on Create Path, and I don't have any reference here, no need for accuracy. I'm just doing some random sort of neighboring buildings to give me a little bit of context, cast some shadows on the building that I really want to analyze. So when I'm done that, I'll click on the green check. They're all going to be one mass. I don't need to do any further analysis on that. They're just there to cast some shadows on this mass. That's the crucial thing. When I start with the solar radiation, I want to click on the mass and I want to go to mass floors. Do this before you do the solar radiation. So I'll look for the mass floors button. I'll click on that. I'll see a list here of all the levels that I have in the project. And I'm going to select all 7 of them. If you're only seeing 2 here, remember to go back to an elevation view. Create levels that would go all the way up to the top of your building. And I'll click OK. And now that I'm done that, I can go to the Analyze tab. And on the Insight 360 panel, remember this is a separate plugin that you have to install from Autodesk. So I'll go to the Insight 360 panel. I'll click on Solar. And the default is that it's going to select all roof exterior surfaces. I want to switch that to User Selection. And I can just disregard this warning that pops up, turn it off. Notice that now that I'm in user selection mode, my cursor changes. I get this little plus symbol whenever I highlight over or hover over geometry. And when I'm finished making my selections, it wants me to click Finish. So I'm just going to pull this out of the way and just zoom in a bit so I can see all of the vertical faces here, all the walls of my building. And as I said, you don't have to hold down Control here. It just assumes that you're doing multiple selections. So you'll see that plus symbol beside the cursor. This allows you to keep selecting. And I'm going to grab everything that is above grade. So I'm going to click on my top option, top of my building here, my roof. Sometimes you have to orbit around a little bit to get just the right orientation for this. I'm just going to have to make a click here and risk dropping a few things. There we go. So just before you click on Finish, make sure you do some orbiting around your building to make sure you've got all your faces. There we go. So I've got all my vertical faces and I got my roof. When I'm done, I can click on Finish. And then I can click on Update. That will run the solar radiation analysis. You'll see it thinking a little bit, and then it's going to generate the colors on the faces of your building that indicate where you've got more intense and less intense solar radiation values. The default is that it gives you this strange kind of purple, lime green, yellow. I'm going to change that to something a little more intuitive. I do that by clicking on the right side button here in the Style section, the little button with the 3 dots. I'm going to go to Solar Analysis Default. I'm going to click on the Color tab. The yellow max value I'm going to leave as it is. The middle value I'm going to change to red, and then the bottom value to blue. So just kind of mimicking what I would intuitively assume about more solar radiation, that it would be sort of in the warmer yellow range, and then where there's less blue, cooler range. So I'll click OK. That'll update automatically. I can turn this dialog box off. And now that stays on screen. And I want you to do a solar or an image export of this. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. Just pay attention to the fact that you've got this little legend. It's an isolated object here. It's its own entity. And as you change your 3D view, it's going to kind of stay in place. But you can move it. So what I'm going to do to export this image is I want to capture what's happening on this, let's say, southeast face of the building. So I'm just going to kind of set my view to be about like that. I'll go to the application menu and I'll go to export images and animations, and I'll select image, and I'll get a little warning here about mass faces. That's all right, disregard that. And then I'll see a dialog box here that allows me to set some properties for the image that I'm going to export. Make sure you name it properly. I'm just going to put this on my desktop. And then it just wants to have a name. And I'll just call this option 1 solar view 1. And I'm going to set the resolution higher than I need, just so I've got more that I can deal with. I'll set this to, say, 3000. And I'll set the format to JPEG lossless. And I'll click OK. Okay, so that's the solar radiation. Once I've done that, then what I want to do is I want to do some energy analysis. And I'm going to go back to the Analyze tab, and I'm going to click on Energy Settings for Starters. So in preparation for doing my energy analysis, I want to make sure that I'm telling Revit to consider conceptual masses. So click on the Energy Settings button, which is the little color wheel with the wrench. And in the bottom, or sorry, in about the middle section here where it says Energy Model, Analysis Mode, make sure it's on Use Conceptual Masses. By default, it's going to be on Use Building Elements, which means it's going to be looking for data about walls and floors and roofs in the Revit file. This is only a file that contains massing objects, so there won't be any building element information. So if you get a warning that says it can't run, it's because you haven't switched this over to conceptual masses. Once you've done that, you can click OK. The next step is I'm going to go to Show Energy Model, and this is where it's going to make this building mass look a little bit more like a conventional building. It's going to show me these windows divided by the floors, which of course is reference to the levels that I created before I started doing any of the analysis steps. So right now you'll see that those windows are being set according to the information here in Energy Settings. So what I'm going to do with this one mass is I'm going to run 2 different analysis steps on it. One is going to be with whatever random value I want for my glazing, and then I'm going to change that and do another run with a different percentage glazing option. It doesn't matter to me which numbers you use. If you want to run 20 and 80, 40 and 70, 60 and 20, whatever. It doesn't matter. I just want you to see the difference when you change the percentage glazing. And you can also add some shading. So I'm going to click on Energy Settings again and use my scroll bar, drop down a little bit here. You can see that at the moment this model is set so that the building has 25% target percentage glazing. So I'm going to just leave that. Remember, this will be my first run. And then I've also got the option to do shading. But for my first kind of baseline run, I'll just leave it as it is. I'll click OK. And then I would go to the little Run Energy Simulation button here, the color wheel with the cloud. This requires, of course, that you have your login, you have access. It's going to think a little bit here. And when you see this window, it means it's ready to accept your file and send it off to the Autodesk server so they can run the analysis. This is the project name here, so you could call this your BPAC assignment mass option 1. And then the run name is going to be mass option 1 glazing 1, something like that. Okay, then I would click continue. You would think a little bit, would send that off. And now it's going to be taken off of my computer, and all the work is going to be done on the Autodesk servers. So I can continue and right away. I don't have to wait for the results. I can just go right to the second step, which would be to click on Energy Settings. And now I can change the percentage glazing here. So now I'm going to do a run where I've got 75%. And since I've got so much more opening here on the faces of my buildings, I'm going to also include a little bit of shading. So I'm going to click OK. You'll see the building does look a little different now. Looks a little odd, actually. So 75% is a pretty high number. That's fine. I'm just going to go with it. And I'm going to click on Run Energy Simulation again. And this is still going to be BPAC assignment mass option 1. Just accept the bracket there. And this is going to be mass option 1 glazing 2. And I'll click continue. Sends it off to the servers. And when I want to see what's actually working here, or what the servers are actually working on, I just click on results and compare. Takes me out of Revit. I get this little window. And this is where I can see all of the analysis steps that I've done. So this is where your naming becomes important, because you're going to see eventually a long list of processes here. And you can see by the little spinning wheels here which ones are actually turning. So there they are. There's the first one, 51%, and here's the second one. When they're finished, I'm not going to wait for them to finish, I'll just show you using some other steps. When they're finished, what I want you to do is I want you to click on one, hold down Control, select a second one, and then click Compare. And you'll see them listed side by side. And as stated on the assignment sheet, what I want you to pay attention to primarily is the energy use intensity. So here we have total EUI, and you can see side by side that in this case, this was not necessarily related to your assignment, but you can see in this case these two buildings side by side, one of them had a significantly smaller energy use intensity value. When you see those, then you can click on Export. It'll make a PDF, and again I'll just dump that on my desktop, and I'll just call this Mass Option 1 Glazing Options 1 and 2, and I'll click Save, and that's what you're going to submit to D2L. Okay, so you'll have 3 of those, because you're going to have 3 different massing options. So I want a PDF with a side-by-side for each of those. Okay.